Before starting the video, I must warn you that an important part of it is a phone call, but what you will hear in it is not for the faint-hearted.
What's going on there?
The story begins in the small town of Lacey, Washington. On October 16, 2022, around 1 p.m., the local police received a very unusual phone call.
911, what are you reporting? Hello? Hello? Can you hear me? What's going on there? Okay, I'm going to get help started to you. Hold on for me for just a second. Do you know the address that you're at, if I said it? Hold on, I'm going to get help started for you, okay? I'm going to stay on the line with you. Just hang tight, okay? My partner's getting help started to you. Are you having a medical emergency? You are? I'm still here, okay? I'm not going to hang up until help is with you, okay? I'm still here. If you can hear me, I'm still here. I'm still here. Are you still there? Ma'am?
Before the conversation ended, the dispatcher heard something resembling a struggle and blows. Based on the voice, it was evident that the caller was a woman whose mouth was clearly covered with something, preventing her from speaking. It wasn't clear whether she could hear what the dispatcher was saying or not, but it was evident that this woman needed help. Using cell tower information, the police determined that that call originated from that street, more specifically, from that house. Within a few minutes, a police unit arrived at the house. Despite the caller falling silent, the device from which the call was made was still active and recorded the arrival of the police at the scene.
Police Department! Lacey Police Department, if you're inside, make yourself known!
The arriving patrol officers discovered an empty house with clear signs that something had recently occurred. The garage door was raised, and the doors of the house were unlocked. On the garage floor, they found the device that was used to make the phone call, the Apple Watch smartwatch. It was shattered but still functional. The patrol officers were perplexed. Something had definitely happened, but at this stage, it was unclear what and with whom. While the officers awaited further instructions, two individuals arrived at the house. They turned out to be a 20-year-old Crystal and her 11-year-old brother who lived there. They were not alone. Their 42-year-old mother, young Anne, also resided with them. According to Crystal, she, her mother, and her brother had been at church in the morning. It was a typical Sunday routine for them. Upon returning home, they noticed their father Chay's minivan parked nearby. Chay didn't live in that house but would occasionally visit once a week to use the laundry facilities. At that time, young Anne and Chay were in the process of getting a divorce. The police had been called to the house a couple of times before. It was related to young Anne's complaints of physical violence from her husband. This was evidently connected to the divorce. Chay even had a restraining order preventing him from approaching young Anne, although it was later lifted. Upon returning home and finding her husband there, young Anne told the children that she wanted to talk to him. She asked her older daughter, 20-year-old Crystal, to take her younger brother for a walk so that she could discuss the divorce details with Jay. Around the same time the police received the phone call, Crystal received an SOS message from her mother. She immediately headed home and saw the patrol officers there. On her way to the house, she noticed that not only was her father's minivan missing, but her mother's car was also gone. She informed the patrol officers about this. Shortly thereafter, her mother's car was found less than a kilometer away from their home. It was also empty. Crystal led the police into the house. Inside, as previously mentioned, there was nobody except for their dog. Some items inside the house were overturned and broken, including young Anne's phone. But the most alarming discovery was a strip of adhesive tape with dark, long hairs on it. The local police swiftly responded to the unfolding situation. Recordings from surveillance cameras of neighboring houses were seized. One of the recordings showed a man in a white t-shirt and dark shorts opening the garage door, getting into the minivan, and driving it inside. Approximately 10 minutes later, on another camera, the same minivan was seen speeding away from the house. Another video captured the minivan passing by a police patrol car, the one that arrived at young Anne's house seconds later. It appeared that the patrol officers were only a few seconds late. Seconds that proved fatal. Subsequent camera footage revealed that the minivan traveled south, out of town. Crystal recognized her father in the footage. Everything pointed to young Anne being abducted by her husband, Jay. An alert was promptly issued with information about the victim and the suspect, but there was no feedback. Night fell, and everyone prepared for the worst. So, what really happened on that day? We already know part of the story. In the morning, young Anne was at a church with her daughter and son. Upon returning home, she found her husband, whom she was in the process of divorcing, there. To discuss a few details with him privately, young Anne asked her children to go for a walk. However, there is a part of the story we haven't mentioned yet. During their conversation, Jay became angry with young Anne. Emotions escalated, and the conversation turned into an argument. Young Anne asked her husband to leave and went upstairs to change clothes. At that moment, she received an unexpected blow to the head. She fell to the floor. Jay told her, "I'd rather kill you than let you have my money." The man continued to beat young Anne. It is worth noting that Jay had spent nearly 30 years in the military, so his strikes were strong and confident. Jay used adhesive tape to bind his wife's hands and feet and cover her mouth. He then left the house for a few minutes. It was precisely at that moment that he was captured by the camera while parking the minivan in the garage. Concurrently, despite her hands being bound with tape, young Anne managed to dial 911 on her Apple Watch. Then Jay returned. He dragged his wife downstairs to the garage, and the sound of this was also captured at the recording. At some point, Jay realized that the Apple Watch was still active. He then took something heavy, presumably a hammer, and struck the watch several times directly on young Anne's wrist. However, the watch survived this series of blows. It came off her hand but remained functional. Jay placed the immobilized young Anne in the minivan's trunk and began driving out of town. After a few hours, Jay pulled his wife out of the trunk and threw her to the ground. They were surrounded by tall trees, indicating that they were in the forest. Jay then started digging a hole, a grave for young Anne. It took him a couple of hours to dig the grave. He then stabbed young Anne's chest multiple times with a knife and threw her into the dug hole. He placed a log on top of her and buried her. That's how he completed what he had planned. It was around 9 p.m. Meanwhile, in the city, the police were putting forth maximum efforts to find Jay. However, As previously mentioned, their efforts proved unsuccessful until the night of the following day. During this time, the police received a phone call from a person living approximately 20 kilometers from the abduction site. The caller reported that someone had trespassed into their backyard. The arriving patrol officers used their flashlights to illuminate the figure described by the caller. The officers quickly realized they were face to face with the wanted person. But it wasn't Che, it was young Anne. Covered in dirt and blood, she rushed toward the officers crying, "Help! My husband wants to kill me!" Pieces of adhesive tape were stuck to her body and she could barely stand on her feet. The patrol officers took her to the nearest clinic, where she received immediate medical assistance. How did she manage to escape from the grave in which she was buried? Well, let's dig into it. So, the first question is likely how she survived multiple knife wounds. Apparently, Che didn't hit any vital organs. Furthermore, when Che threw her into the pit and started burying her, young Anne twisted her body underground to prevent soil from entering her nose and blocking her breathing. In fact, there was a small pocket of air between her nose and the ground, allowing her to breathe. As Che buried her, young Anne could hear him periodically saying that she would die. Once Che finished burying his wife, he left, leaving young Anne alone beneath the ground. Bound, injured, and barely able to breathe, she spent about 3 hours in that pit. During that time, she managed to free her hands from the adhesive tape. Afterward, she started digging herself out. She removed the log that Che had placed on top and climbed out of the hole. When she looked around, she saw something that terrified her to the core. Che was still there. Yes, his minivan was still parked nearby, about 50 meters away. However, its windows were fogged up. Perhaps he was sleeping inside the car at that moment, so he didn't react to young Anne escaping the grave. In panic, she ran through the dark, dense forest as fast as she could. She ran for about half an hour until she spotted car headlights on the road. Following it, she arrived at a house where she was later found by the police. The police began searching the forest but couldn't find Che. However, the next day around 9 a.m., a call came in to the 911 service about a suspicious vehicle near the location where the woman was found. It was Che's car, and he was inside. He surrendered to the patrol officers without resistance. As a result, Che was charged with a series of crimes, including attempted murder, kidnapping, and making threats to kill. At present, he doesn't plead guilty. During the initial hearing, young Anne's lawyer read a message from her.
These are her words. "Please, no bail. I am really afraid for my life. I just want to emphasize that I fear him so much, and he will kill me again if he is out."
Following this hearing, Che was denied bail, and he faces the possibility of a life sentence. The most remarkable aspects of this case is how young Anne survived, demonstrating her incredible will to live.